All right, now we're going to solve quadratics by factoring. So if you're not good with the factoring yet, there's a previous video, and the previous side of this worksheet is all about factoring when a equals 1 or when a does not equal 1. All right, so for 16, we're solving this quadratic equation. It's a quadratic because it's a second degree function. It's got an x squared. The highest degree is x squared. All right. So what we want to do to solve this, we want to move everything to one side so that it equals 0. And then we want to factor. So I'm going to minus x squared from both sides. Let me use a different color. I'm going to do minus x squared from both sides. And I'm also going to subtract 20 from both sides. So x squared minus x squared is 0. 20 minus 20 is also 0. So on the right side, I'm going to get 0. All right, so 2x squared minus x squared gives me x squared. X I can't combine with anything, so I'm going to leave it as plus x. And then now we have a minus 20. Remember, I can't combine x with 20, right? Those are not same terms, so I can't combine like terms there. Okay, now that I have x squared plus x minus 20, I can factor. So I notice my a value is 1, so I can just use that traditional x method. I need two numbers that multiply to negative 20 and add to positive 1. That's going to be positive, let's see, positive 5 and negative 4. So my two factors here are x plus 5 and x minus 4. All right, now to solve what they call the zero product rule, we need to take either one of these terms, and they're going to have to equal 0. So if this first term equals 0, then the whole thing equals 0 because you're multiplying. Anything times 0 is 0. If the second term equals 0, then the whole thing is 0 because anything times 0 is 0. So if x plus 5 equals 0, then the whole thing is equal to 0. And if x minus 4 equals 0, then the whole thing is going to be equal to 0 because anything times 0 is 0. So I need to solve these two equations now then. So I subtract 5 on both sides. I get x equals negative 5. I add 4 to both sides on this one, and I get x equals 4. Okay, so that would be how we solve. Right, so if this was an equation, if there was a y in there, right, these would be my x-intercepts if this was a quadratic function. It's not a function here. There's no y or no output, right? It's just quadratic equation. Okay. All right, let's look at the next one. So the next one, again, I got to move everything to one side. So I'm going to subtract 3x from both sides. So I'm going to get 2x squared minus 3x minus 9 equals 0, right? That's going to give us 0. I can't combine the 3x with anything. So we're just going to leave it in there as negative 3x. All right, in this case, my a is not 0. So I'm going to have to solve. So I'm going to, do my expanding method here. So a times c, 2 times negative 9 is negative 18. And then b is negative 3. Okay. I need two numbers that multiply to negative 18, add to negative 3. That's going to be negative 6 and positive 3. So I'm going to do 2x squared. I'm going to expand negative 3x into negative 6x and 3x. So I'm going to do negative 6x plus 3x minus 9 equals 0. From there, I can factor my first two terms and my second two terms. So the first two terms, 2x squared and 6x, the greatest common factor there is 2x. What's left behind is x minus 3. I'm sorry, x minus 3. Right, if you go backwards just to check, 2x times x is 2x squared. 2x times negative 3 is negative 6x. And we're good. Over here in the second two, the last two terms, 3x minus 9. The greatest common factor is a 3. So what we have left is x minus 3 equals 0. All right, so what we have in common in these two terms is x minus 3. All right, what do we have left? We're going to have 2x plus 3. I'm sorry. There's no plus here. I'm sorry. Let me check my mic again because it says it's not working. All right, it says it's working. Okay, so I'm going to factor out an x minus 3. And then in parentheses, right, what's left is 2x plus 3. Okay, then we're going to use that zero product rule, right? Anything times 0 is 0. So if x minus 3 is 0, the whole thing is 0. If 2x plus 3 is 0, then the whole thing is 0. Okay, so I'm going to solve these two equations. I'm going to add 3 to both sides. So one solution is going to be x equals 3. Over here, I'm going to subtract 3 from both sides. I'm going to get 2x equals negative 3. Then I'm going to divide both sides by 2. And I get x equals negative 3 over 2. All right, let's do one more. Let's do number 20. Okay, so to get it equal to 0 and move everything to one side, the first thing I'm going to have to do is expand out x minus 1 quantity squared. So I'm going to have 3x squared minus 8x minus 19 equals, right? And then x minus 1 times x minus 1. All right, to do x minus 1 times x minus 1, we have to FOIL, right? First outer, inner, last. So x times x is x squared. X minus x is negative x. Negative 1 times x is negative x. And then negative 1 times negative 1 is plus 1. When I combine these two together, I'm going to get x squared minus 2x plus 1. Now that I've factored that or distributed that out, I can move everything to one side. So I'm going to move everything to the left side. I'm going to subtract x squared on both sides. I'm going to add 2x on both sides. I'm going to subtract 1 on both sides. Okay, so over here I get 2x squared minus 6x minus 20. On the right side, x squared minus x squared is 0. Negative 2x plus 2x is 0. And then 1 minus 1 is 0. So I get 0. Okay. A here is bigger than 1. It's not 1. So I need to do that expanding method. So I need to do a times c. 2 times negative 20 is negative 40. Okay. And then b here is negative 6. Right, and then we can expand it out. However, what I also notice is that all of these coefficients are even, 2, negative 6, and 20. So what I actually am going to do to make this problem easier for myself is I'm going to divide both sides by 2. So if I divide the left side by 2, I'm going to get x squared minus 3x minus 10. And then 0 divided by 2 is 0. But now my coefficient is just 1, so I can use my traditional x method. I need two numbers that multiply to negative 10, add to negative 3. That's going to be negative 5 and positive 2. So my factors here are x minus 5 and x plus 2. Using that zero product rule, now I can say x minus 5 equals 0, or x plus 2 equals 0. Right? Because if either of these equals 0, the whole thing's going to equal 0, because anything times 0 is 0. I'm going to subtract 2 on both sides. Negative 2. I'm going to add 5 over here. We get x equals 5.